You've heard the name Ivan the Terrible. It brings to mind this image of a crazy, bloodthirsty tyrant, right? But what if I told you his infamous cruelty wasn't just random madness? What if it was a calculated, deliberate political strategy? Today, we're diving into how Russia's first Tsar turns terror into policy.
First things first, we gotta clear up a huge misconception about his name. In Russian, Ivan's title is Grozny. Now, that doesn't really translate to terrible like we think of it, as in awful or evil. A much better way to think of it is feared or formidable or even awe-inspiring. You know, exactly the kind of reputation a ruler in the 16th century would have wanted.
So the big question is, how did this awe-inspiring ruler get remembered as just plain terrible? Well, that's the story. We're about to see how Ivan took that idea of being feared and weaponized it to build an entire empire, and the absolutely catastrophic price Russia paid for it.
To really get a handle on Ivan's brutal methods, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand the trauma that created him. His crown, well, it was basically forged in death and betrayal from day one.
I mean, look at this. His childhood was an absolute masterclass in cruelty. He was just a pawn in a vicious game played by these powerful, noble families, the boyars. They were constantly fighting for power, carving up the kingdom for themselves, and pretty much ignoring this young prince. And that taught him a lesson that would define his entire life. Trust absolutely no one. And this quote right here, it just shows you how deeply personal that resentment was. This wasn't some abstract political idea for him. He remembered being hungry, being ignored, being humiliated. So he grew up with this deep-seated paranoia, convinced that enemies were hiding in every shadow of the court. And, considering his own mother was probably poisoned, that fear wasn't exactly crazy.
Okay, so picture this. You're a young Tsar. You're surrounded by these powerful nobles you totally despise and distrust, and you're ruling a country that's falling apart. What do? Well, Ivan's solution was, let's just say it was as innovative as it was terrifying. He decided to build a state-sponsored terror machine. He did something totally unprecedented. He just up and left Moscow one day. Then he sends letters back saying he's abdicating and it's all the boyars' fault because of their corruption and treason. The people completely panicked. The nobles were totally cornered, and they begged him to come back. He said, fine, but on one condition. He gets absolute total power. And with that, he carved out a massive chunk of Russia to be his own personal territory, the Oprachna, where his word was the only law that mattered.
And to police this new personal kingdom, he created a whole new kind of force. The Oprachniki weren't a regular army. No, they were a hand-picked death squad, a brotherhood of about 1,000 guys whose only job qualification was being fanatically loyal to Ivan and Ivan alone. They were his personal weapon, aimed right at the heart of the old nobility. And they made their purpose crystal clear with these terrifying symbols. They rode everywhere on black horses, dressed in black robes like some kind of demonic monks. And get this, they had a severed dog's head and a broom hanging from their saddles. The message couldn't have been more obvious, and it was psychologically devastating. We are the Tsar's dogs, we're here to sniff out treason, and then we're gonna sweep you away.
Now, the Oprachnina wasn't just for show. It wasn't just intimidation. It was a very real tool of statecraft, and Ivan used it to make a brutal example of anyone who even thought about challenging him.
His paranoia eventually zoomed in on the rich and powerful city of Novgorod. Now, whether there was a real conspiracy going on, historians still debate that. But for Ivan, just the suspicion was enough. He was convinced the city's leaders were plotting against him, and he decided to make an example out of them that all of Russia would see and never, ever forget.
His response wasn't to quietly arrest a few nobles. Nope. It was a full-blown massacre. Early accounts claimed, tens of thousands died, but modern historians think the number of victims was probably somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 people, killed over 5 straight weeks of butchery.
And this was all public. It was performative cruelty. The Oprachniki were ordered to execute people in the most brutal ways they could think of. This wasn't just about getting rid of enemies. It was a horrifying demonstration that no one and no city was safe from the Tsar's rage. This was terror as a political message, broadcast in blood.
In a dark way, Ivan's reign of terror actually worked. He completely broke the power of the old nobility and centralized the Russian state. But the paranoia and the rage that powered his political machine, well, they eventually came for the one thing he could never replace.
This painting, it's one of the most famous and haunting images in all of Russian art. It captures the ultimate personal cost of Ivan's rule. This is the moment where the political and the personal just catastrophically collide, where the tyrant's rage destroys his own flesh and blood, his own future.
And the final tragedy just built in these horrifying steps. It starts with him flying into a rage over what his pregnant daughter-in-law was wearing. He beat her so badly she had a miscarriage. Then, when his son, his heir, confronted him about it, that same uncontrollable rage turned on him. In one awful, terrible moment, Ivan struck his own son with his staff, killing the future of his dynasty with his own 2 hands.
So after all of that, what did it all amount to? What was the final scorecard for Ivan's reign of terror?
Well, on one hand, you can't deny his successes. He crushed the boyars, he centralized power, and he conquered huge new territories, really transforming the old state of Muscovy into the beginning of the Russian Empire. He basically set the template for centuries of Russian autocracy. But the cost, my God, the cost was immense. The Oprichnina totally wrecked the economy, and his constant wars bled the treasury dry, leaving the country broke and vulnerable.
And because he'd killed his capable heir, the throne went to his younger son, Fyodor, who was, well, he was politically weak. So when Fyodor died without an heir of his own, the dynasty that had ruled Russia for more than 700 years just ended. And Russia plunged into a period of total chaos, civil war, famine, invasion, known as the Time of Troubles. It was a direct consequence of Ivan destroying his own line of succession.
So Ivan mastered fear. He turned it into a tool of the state, and he used it to build an empire and make his own power absolute. But the paranoia he unleashed on his enemies eventually turned inward. It cost him his son, his dynasty, and it threw the very nation he built into utter ruin. It's like he created a monster to control Russia, but in the end, he couldn't control the monster inside himself.